Good evening, everyone, and thank you so very much for being with us here this evening. I deeply appreciate your participation here tonight in a premier Jewish cultural and educational event with one of the 5 surviving athletes from the Munich Olympics in 1972. It is a true tribute to the community and visitors of Jackson Hole to see so many of you here with us. See a lot of familiar faces, quite a few new faces. My name is Rabbi Zalman Mendelsohn, and I serve as the rabbi for the Chabad Jewish Center here in Jackson Hole, as well as throughout the state of Wyoming. At times like this, when we commemorate 40 years since the Munich Olympics, where we saw in the belly of peace, love, and harmony the tragedy and destruction, the hate, the attack of innocent lives. It is a time for us to be able to reflect, gather together, and think about the things that we can do to ensure that our world maintains the values that the Olympics so carefully and clearly promotes. The values of brotherhood, sisterhood, love, friendship, unity. The values that the Olympics promotes and supports. And so, as we begin to this evening, and before I call upon our guest speaker, Dan Alon, who flew in all the way from Israel to be here with us, to honor us with his presence and with his story, I'd like to make mention of the unfortunate reality that it's been 40 years that the families of the victims, the 11 beautiful young athletes who died not because of old age or disease, but died because of simple and pure hatred. And so it is times like this that we must gather together and commemorate them. And it is sad for me, and likewise for so many of us here in this room, that the International Olympic Committee has decided not to honor our victims with a moment of silence. And so, without taking too much of your time, we'll do a very brief ceremony before I call upon Dan Alon to share his story with us. I'd like to call up some community members who are here with us to help us light 11 candles, one for each one of the victims who have passed, to honor their memory, to honor their legacy. And this way we pledge to never forget. While we move on in life and we don't ever turn into a people of victimhood or a people of sadness, and we are the people to always think of as victims. We move on, we pledge forward, we create a better world, we fight for values of goodness and kindness. Nonetheless, it is important that we recall the past. Together, if you have this sheet in front of you, if we could just together read out loud the names of all of the 11 victims. Hopefully this will bring some solace to their soul and some solace to our future. 1, 2, 3. David Berger, Zeev Friedman, Yosef Goodfriend, Eliezer Halfin, Yosef Romano, Amitzur Shapira, Kehat Shor, Mark Slavin, Andre Spitzer, Yaakov Springer, Moshe Weinberg. Please take a moment and stand for a moment of silence. You may be seated. We must never forget the fallen victims, and we must always pledge forward in peace. Before we move along to hear from Dan Alon, would like to sing together. If you know this song, please join along, A Song of Peace, followed by a few short words by our representative, Ruth Ann. If you know this song, please join along. Ohoseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Ohoseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Hand, please.
Thank you. Well, we're of course deeply privileged to have Mr. Alon with us here tonight. And it's especially timely since, as you're here this evening, millions of people around the world are watching the Olympics in London. And, you know, my dad talks about being in the opening ceremony of the Olympics and being part of that ceremony. And my dad is a coach and a veteran and, you know, a big, not very emotional guy. But he talks about the spirit of that with more emotion than he talks about many events in his life, and how the spirit of camaraderie and unity. And I think that's why this act of terrorism was so poignant in our history, because it happened at a time that was supposed to be, you know, during this time of unity. And so it's my understanding that Mr. Alon hasn't talked about the event very much until the past few years. And I'm just very grateful that he's doing so now, because it's important for us to remember that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism still exist in our world, and not just in the countries that we think of. And in our peaceful little valley in Jackson Hole, it's just important that we continue to support a message of peace, and that we speak out wherever we can. So thank you all for coming on a beautiful Jackson Hole evening.
Thank you very much, Ruth Ann. With no further ado, Mr. Alon was born in Tel Aviv in 1945. He still lives in Tel Aviv with his wife, Adele, and has 3 children, Meir, Arik, and Pazit. Dan Alon started fencing when he was 12 years old. His late father, Meir, was his first coach. Dan was Israel's champion fencer for many years. He represented Israel in many international competitions, including competitions in the UK and France. 1 year before the Olympic Games in Munich, Dan participated in many international competitions in order to become one of Israel's delegates. The final competition, which finalized his participation in Munich, was the Coronation Cup in London. On August 27th, 1972, was the official opening of the Munich Olympic Games. On August 29th, 1972, Dan Alon participated in games and beat many of his opponents. Then, on September 5th, at 4:30 a.m., was the Black September attack on the building of the Israeli delegates. Dan Alon miraculously escaped, and throughout the entire attack, the games continued as scheduled. After a botched rescue effort, Dan was given the frightful job of re-entering the Israeli compound and gathering the belongings of his murdered comrades. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, Dan Alon flew back to Israel with 11 coffins draped in Israeli flags as the country watched with broken hearts. Dan quit fencing following the attacks. Currently, Dan is the managing director of a plastics packaging company in Israel. He still maintains contact with the families of the fallen athletes. Please give your hearty Jackson Hole warm welcome to Dan Alon.
Thank you. You said everything already. Nothing left. In ancient time, okay, the people in all Greece believed that Olympia is a sacred place. Anyone who dared to enter it with a force of arms committed an offense against the gods. 3,000 years later, 1972 Olympic Games in Munich, a group of people committed an offense against the gods and the entire human race around the world. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Alon. I live in Tel Aviv. I was born in Tel Aviv, 1945, just 3 years before Israel became an independent state. I'm married. My wife, her name is Adele. She is working as a nurse in the main hospital of Tel Aviv. Sorry. Originally, she is South African. But 36 years ago, when she was 19, she decided to leave all the family in Cape Town and to make Aliyah to Eretz Israel, all by her own. And one day she was hitchhiking on the road between Haifa to Tel Aviv, and I stopped the car, and she opened the door, she entered the car, she looked at me, and she decided to stay in Israel. One month later, we decided to get married, and we have 3 children, 2 sons and 1 lovely daughter. They all live in Tel Aviv happily. I really thank you very much to be with you this evening, and I appreciate the honor and the opportunity you have given me to tell you my story.